All right, so sorry I was not able to be here on Friday, and that you have to watch these videos, but hopefully the time you watch the videos can be offset by the time you save by doing your homework during class. So we'll see how it goes. So 6.5, and also it's actually section 5.4 in the book, is dealing with inverse trig functions. Basically, once we've defined a function, the sine of 30 degrees, the minute we have a function that does that, there becomes a need to undo that function. So we can solve something like this. Kind of like, we got x squared equals 16. We needed a function to undo that x squared so that we could solve it, and it was the square root function. Well, here, that function is going to be called the inverse sine function or the arcsine function, and you guys have already dealt with the inverse sine function. The issue is that whenever you dealt with the inverse sine function, we were only using it with right triangle trigonometry. When we expanded our angles to be all real angles, that inverse sine function is we need to dig a little deeper into it, okay, and develop it. So it's the inverse sine function, but it's also called the arcsine. These are interchangeable. Inverse sine looks like this, arcsine like that. The reason we don't like the inverse sine as much as the arcsine is because kids tend to think that, they get it mixed up with the reciprocal function. The inverse sine does not mean that. It's not a -1 power that moves that sign to the bottom. It's actually the function that undoes the sign. So try not to get these things here mixed up. Anyway, so it's not that. Let's develop this function. Let's graph the sine of x. Period is 2 pi divided into 4. I don't normally label these, but I'm going to this time. And you should be pretty comfortable with graphing this thing by now, hopefully. Sine starts at 0, so 0, up, down, down, up, down. And we get a nice smooth curve for it. Ooh, it's looking kind of bad. I'm going fast. I want to make this. I don't know how long these videos are going to end up being, but we'll just go with it. Okay, so first of all, let's review our knowledge of inverse functions. First of all, does this have an inverse function, or why doesn't it have an inverse function? If you remember, a function only has an inverse function if it passes the horizontal line test. And this obviously fails the horizontal line test. It fails it an infinite number of times as you sweep across there. So this doesn't actually have an inverse function. The same thing happened whenever we had a quadratic. The x squared function does not have an inverse function. So the question then becomes, how can we modify the sine function so that it does? Well, we do kind of what we did here. We kind of said, well, let's just restrict the domain on this thing so that I could develop the square root function. Same thing here. I'm going to restrict the domain so that it is 1-to-1. It does pass the horizontal line test and has an inverse. So we could cut it. We want to get the entire range. So what they decided to do was to cut it from negative pi halves to positive pi halves. If we restrict the domain so we're only looking at this chunk of the function right here, then it is 1-to-1, and then it does have an inverse. So this function is called the restricted sine function. I'm going to just graph it here. Basically just goes from pi halves to negative pi halves, 1 to -1. And it basically kind of just looks, different color there. Kind of looks like this. It's horizontally flat, comes through there. That looks bad, but you get the idea. This is called the restricted sine function, and sometimes we denote it by a capital S. So if I ever draw something with a sign with a capital S, it means the restricted sine function. So let's find the domain and range. Because it's restricted, the domain now becomes negative pi halves to pi halves inclusive. And the range is still inclusive -1 to 1. Okay? So now let's find the inverse, because this does have an inverse function. Let's use our knowledge of inverse functions to graph the inverse sine. Well, first of all, let's find the domain and range of it. If you recall, the domain of your function becomes the range of your inverse function. Remember how you switch the x's and y's around? So that becomes the range, and then this becomes the domain. Basically, in the original function, you take the signs of angles and you get ratio answers. For the inverse sine function, we're going to take the inverse sine of ratios, and our outputs are going to be angles. And if you recall, we basically just switch these ordered pairs around. This is pi halves comma 1. Well, the new point is going to be x is 1, and your y is pi halves. This is 0, 0. That stays the same. And then this last point is going to be negative 1, negative pi halves. And this is a little bit difficult, but you're basically, if you recall, we're trying to reflect this thing across the line y equals 1. It's kind of hard to draw y equals 1 because this is pi halves. This is like 1.5 something, I don't know. So it's kind of hard to get that angle right. So it's kind of hard to visually reflect it. But basically, this thing is horizontally flat to horizontally flat. So this one's going to be vertically flat to vertically flat. So it's going to kind of look like this. In fact, if I were to continue, if I were to do the unrestricted and reflect it, it would actually kind of look like the sine function. It'd kind of look like this. You know, it'd be like the sine function basically on its side, if you will. But we don't want the entire thing. We only want the pieces that are like, if I were to have this, it wouldn't be a function, right? It wouldn't be an inverse function. That's why we need to restrict the domain. So this is the inverse sine function, and this is the domain and range. Put a little star by these things because these are going to be important. Like the quadratic function, because I restricted the domain, there were tricky things with square roots and squares. When you square root both sides, you got to remember the plus or minus. If you square both sides of an equation, I don't know if you remember, but you could introduce extraneous solutions. Because we restricted this, there were tricky things involved with squares and square roots. Because we restricted this, there are going to be tricky things involved with inverse sines, inverse cosines, etc. Okay? So let's keep this range in mind at all times. Find the domain and range. I guess I already did that. Negative 1 to 1. Negative pi halves to pi halves. Okay? All right, so the next bit here, I kind of just summarize it because what we really need to do is do the same thing with the cosine, do the same thing with the tangent. Thankfully, we're not going to do it with the cosecant and the secant and all those. But I didn't want to take 30 minutes of your time to go through the other two. So let's kind of summarize it here. This is the sine. This is the restricted sine. This is the restricted sine. This is the domain and the range. We just did that. And then I flipped the x and y coordinates, and this is the graph of the inverse. And this is the domain and range. Okay? So that's review. For the cosine, let's just kind of go through this instead of doing it on our own. The cosine starts at 1 and goes down to here. So we have to restrict this at a different location. We can't restrict this at pi halves and negative pi halves because it wouldn't be 1 to 1 on that interval. So mathematicians decided, let's restrict it from here to here. So for the restricted cosine, the domain is 0 to pi. Range is still negative 1 to 1. And then when I flip these points around, this point 0, 1 becomes 1, 0. This point pi halves 0 becomes 0 pi halves. And this point pi negative 1 becomes negative 1 pi. And where this thing is horizontally flat, this graph is vertically flat. And again, if you were to continue on, it's basically a cosine function reflected across the line y equals x so that it goes up and down. The domain of this function is still that, meaning you take inverse cosines of ratios that range between negative 1 and 1, and more importantly, when you take the inverse cosine of a ratio, it's going to spit out an... Oh my gosh, this is a typo. Crap, sorry. it's going to spit out an angle between 0 and pi. Okay? Please fix that in the notes. The output range for the inverse cosine is 0 to pi. All right, tangent. Tangent is pretty easy to restrict. We basically kind of take one iteration, one period from the asymptote, we kind of get rid of the rest of it. So this becomes the restricted tangent, as if we kind of just visually blank out these things here. I guess I didn't actually draw the restricted tangent by itself. And then when we flip the points around, when we reflect this thing across the line y equals x, it kind of looks like this here. Okay? 0, 0, 0, 0. Pi force, 1, 1, pi force. This approaches a vertical asymptote, therefore the inverse is going to approach a horizontal asymptote. Same on the back side. So here we have vertical asymptotes at x equals pi halves. Here we're going to have horizontal asymptotes at x equals pi halves. And the important piece of information here is the domain of this is exclusive, pi halves to pi halves, and the range is all reals. Therefore, the domain is going to be all reals, meaning the ratio that you take the inverse tangent of can be any ratio you want, whereas for sines and cosines, it can only be ratios from -1 to 1. And the range is going to be exclusive negative pi halves to pi halves. So the tangent is kind of like the sine in that the ranges are kind of the same, except here we got inclusive endpoints, and for the tangent we have exclusive endpoints. All right, so to recap, first of all, I like thinking like this. In fact, I'm going to give you questions designed like that. We take the sine of angles and it spits out a ratio, or the tangent of angles and it gives you ratios. However, we switch around the x's and the y's when we do inverses. So my angles become the output and my ratios become the input. You take inverse sines of ratios and it's going to spit out an angle. But it's not going to spit out an angle anywhere. It's only going to spit out angles in certain quadrants or in certain ranges. So this is my little drawing to help you with inverse functions. When you take the inverse sine, it'll always spit out an angle between negative pi halves and positive pi halves inclusive. Tangent, exclusive negative pi halves to exclusive pi halves. So quadrants 4 and 1. And then the cosine will always give you an angle between inclusive 0 to pi. Now this is a little monster in the third quadrant. You're going to kind of see what I mean with that. Basically, there's a monster in the third quadrant. So when you're dealing with inverse trig functions, you're never going to get an angle in the third quadrant, nor are you going to kind of go through the third quadrant. I'll talk about how you do that. Okay, so that puts us at 13 minutes. Now I have a ton of examples to work through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another video, and I'm just going to start working through examples. Okay, you don't need to watch all of them. However, you kind of need to watch enough so that you really understand the idea. All right?